First of all, I would like to say a warm welcome to all to this 24th Stars Talk, which is in the series of the Stars Talks that we give through the Challenge Lab at the Stars EU Alliance, and to share the knowledge, competence, and interest that we have within the Alliance. And today we are very honored that we have Fabienne Terryn from University of Marie and Louis Pasteur in Besançon in France as a presenter on the very important topic of gender-based and sexual violence. So with this, I would also say that it will be a presentation, but afterwards there will be possibility to question and answer. So if you have any thoughts, anything that comes up during the presentation, please wait for them and we could have a discussion dialogue afterwards when Fabienne has presented given her presentation today. So with that, thank you very much, Fabienne, and please, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you. I am truly honored to be the speaker of this new Stars EU talk. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak about the fight against sexual and gender-based violence in France. I plan to speak about 40 minutes and then answer any question you may have, and I will try to be both precise and concise, but please note that I won't be able to cover everything in the time given, so don't hesitate to ask me questions afterwards if any point deserves to further explanations. So over the past 30 years, French law has evolved significantly regarding sexual offenses. New offenses such as sexual harassment, incestuous rape, and what we could call sexist contempt have emerged. Criminal procedures has also evolved to better support victims of sexual offenses, particularly when they are children. This remarkable evolution, which is still ongoing today, highlights the importance of the law in supporting changes in our societies. In this regard, the evolution of the definition of rape in French law provides a particularly instructive example. Rape in France, rape is an offense that French law has punished for a very long time, even before 1791, which is the date of the very first penal code in France. So we could say that it's a very old offense. And as it is a very old offense, we could think that the issue of punishing rape is settled. We might think that since the offense is so old, it's not the one we should focus on to appreciate the evolution of French law in the fight against gender-based offenses, gender-based violence. But quite the contrary. We will see that rape is an offense whose definition remained frozen for a long time because it did not raise any debate. However, since the 1970s, and then again starting in 2020, the definition of rape has provoked intense debate in France. And these developments in the definition of rape are particularly interesting because they reflect how our society perceives gender relations. And more specifically, we observe that it was society that at first pushed the law to evolve. But now the law is also viewed as a tool that must support changes in mentalities. So the law clearly plays an educational role and becomes a key to transforming society. Well, to present this topic, I propose proceeding in three steps. And first, I suggest we go back in the time and start with the traditional definition of rape, which remained unchanged for decades until the law of 1920. So, as I have just said, rape is the crime that has been punishable under the law since at least 1791, and it was also punishable later under the Napoleon Code of 1810. And what is interesting is the fact that in both of these texts, rape is a punishable offense. It is punishable, but there is no definition given. We have no definition. And it's like everyone intuitively knew what it means. So, since the law did not provide a definition of rape, criminal judges and also the academics of the time tried to define rape. And the result was an extremely restrictive definition, extremely narrow definition of rape for different reasons, for several reasons. First, at this time, rape is always understood as the act of a man's penis entering a woman's vagina. So you understand that it's always an act committed by a man against a woman. So the rape of a man is inconceivable, nor is the rape involving an object, or a rape committed, why not, by a woman. So all these situations are not included in the definition of rape. Second, rape is conceivable only if the man in question is not the woman's husband. So, on the other hand, if he is the husband, he cannot commit rape. It's not possible. Marital rape is not admitted. So, on the contrary, it was considered that the wife had a kind of marital duty and had to fulfill it. So forcing one's wife to have sexual relation was absolutely not punishable. It should be noted that at the time, the law in force in France was a patriarchal one. It was a patriarchal law. For example, the Civil Code gave married women the status of legal incapacity. Legal incapacity is similar to that of minor children. It also states that a wife owes obedience to her husband. And until 1971, the husband was officially considered as the head of the family. So, in this context, it is not surprising that the husband had the legal right to rape his wife. Finally, last reason why the former definition of rape was very restrictive is the fact that when sexual relation was imposed on a woman by a man who was not her husband, it had to be proven that the man had used violence or coercion or surprise. Otherwise, the woman's lack of consent was not established. So let's stop just for a moment to consider what does that mean. coercion, violence, and surprise. It meant that for a woman to be considered not consenting, the man had to use physical force against her, physical strength. So this is what the use of violence or coercion implies. Actually, at the time, violence was understood to mean physical strength, physical violence, and coercion was understood in the same way. So rape could be made by using violence or coercion. But rape could also be established without the use of physical strength in cases of surprise. Surprise, I don't know how to translate this word. It comes from French, but the idea is that the rapist tricked the victim into consenting. So surprise occurs when there is, in a sense, deception, and the person's consent is not truly given. So I give you an example to make you understand better. In an old decision by the Court of Cassation in France, it's a decision from the 19th century, so an old decision. Rape by surprise was found against a man who, in the dark, had slipped into a woman's bed. And the woman, believing he was her husband, had a sexual relationship with him before realizing she had been deceived. So this is what rape with surprise is. So in conclusion, in the absence of one of those elements, violence, coercion, or surprise, there could not be rape. Thus, if the woman had simply refused to have a sexual relationship, but without resisting enough to force the man to use physical strength, so there was no rape. And it was under this law that the Tanglet and Castellano case erupted in 1974. So let's say a word about this very famous case. It was about two young Belgian women, aged 24 and 19. And these women had set up their tent on a beach in Marseille. And these women were raped all night long by 3 unknown men. After attempting to fight back and push away the men who had burst into their tent in the middle of the night, the two women, empowered, were raped and beaten for several hours. Please note that the women even struck the men with a hammer in order to push them away. So they really tried to resist. But the perpetrators, who were quickly caught, we were quickly arrested, admitted to the sexual act, but they claimed that the young women had consented. They had consented. So the case was reclassified as violence, just violence, not a rape. And it took all the determination of their lawyer, which was someone who is very known in France, Gisèle Halimi, to have the charges reclassified as rape. And during the trial, the issue of the young women's consent was debated. And finally, at the conclusion of the trial, the 3 men were convicted of rape, and they were sentenced to prison terms ranging from 4 to 6 years of prison. So what is interesting with this case, it is that it highlights the need to reform the criminal definition of rape, and it led to the law of December 23 in 1980. So this new definition states that rape is any act of sexual penetration of whatever nature committed against another person through violence, coercion, or surprise. But once again, the text would soon be challenged and its limits will be revealed. This brings us to the second step. So a first criticism of this new text arose very quickly. Very quickly, a new criticism of this text arose because this text left this text. No, sorry, it's not there. Okay, this text left unresolved the question of whether rape could be committed between spouses. So we had to wait until 1992 for the Court of Cassation admitting this possibility. And so marital rape was only recognized in 1992. And it was not until the law of April 4 in 2006 that this recognition of rape between spouses was written into law. So it is now classified as rape, and it's punishable more severely than an ordinary rape. But another criticism has been made to the definition of rape that result from the 1980 law, and since 2020, we see that society realized that this definition ignores the specific nature of rapes committed against young children or incestuous rape. And two books would bring these problems, these issues to the public attention. The first is the book written by Vanessa Springora in 2020. It is titled Le Consentement. And in this book, Vanessa Springora describes her story. And it is a story of a 14-year-old girl who is targeted by literary celebrity, a famous writer, which is named Gabriel Matzneff. And at the age of 14, the girl left her family home and went to live with this man. And she described the manipulative relationship he would exert over her. She also describes, and it's very interesting, she describes the kindness, the benevolence with which the writer's intellectual circle and the society of the time viewed this relationship. Her consent was never in doubt, even if she was only 14. So she describes the mechanics of control, and she explained why it is a mistake to seek sexual consent from children. So awareness of the need to change the definition of rape committed against young children is beginning to grow. And another book, very important book, put also this problem in light. This book is written by Camille Kouchner, and it is titled La Familia Grande. And Camille Kouchner is the daughter of a famous minister, French minister, and her mother remarried Olivier Duhamel, who is a well-known law professor. He was a professor in Besançon too. And he was someone very famous, very who frequently appears on media, television, etc. And he also had close ties with political circles. So in her book, Camille Kouchner denounces the sexual relations that her stepfather, Olivier Duhamel, imposed on her twin brother, who was a minor at the time. And she describes the dynamics of incest. She also describes the burden of silence and how those around them knew about the truth, but yet failed to act and to denounce the offenses. And the scandal caused by these revelations was very huge. And it is under these circumstances that the law of April 21, 2021 was adopted. This new law creates two new offenses, two new cases of rape. The rape of a child under the age of 15 and the incestuous rape of a minor. In the case of a rape of a minor under 15, it will be simply necessary to establish that an adult, that is to say a person over 18, impose an act of penetration or oral sex on a minor under 15. So it will be enough for the rape to be established, and there is no need to prove a lack of consent. And this is what is important. In the case of incest, it is sufficient to show that an act of penetration or oral sex imposed on a minor under the age of 18. And this act had to be imposed by an ascendant. So father, mother, grandmother, grandfather, and why not great-grandmother, great-grandfather, etc. So what happens if the perpetrator is another adult within the family? Well, as long as they are adults, the law also applies to brother, sister, uncle, aunt, great-uncle, great-aunt, nephew, niece, and the spouses of all these persons. So stepfather, stepmother, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, etc. All these persons can be charged with incestuous rape. However, for those persons who are not ascendant, another condition is required. It must be demonstrated that this person exerts authority over the victim. But if these conditions if all the conditions exist, it is not necessary to prove a lack of consent. So it was a very important law, but despite this law, the definition of rape remained criticized. And the famous Pellicot case, the case of Gisèle Pellicot, I think maybe you have heard about it. It was in 2024 in France. This case showed that French society hadn't really changed that much since 1970, and the case involving the young Belgian woman. Why do I say that? Because in this Pellicot case, we see that the issue of consent remained debated, even in the case of this woman who was completely unconscious. So the case revealed that some men still believe that as long as physical force isn't used, well, it isn't rape. And others had no problem with the idea that consent to sexual relation could be given by the husband. So this brings us to the third stage, and it will be the last, the reform of the definition of rape by the law of November 6, 2025. According to the lawmakers who introduced this law, one of the objectives of this reform is to replace rape culture by a culture of free consent. And this new law is supposed to express societal values of equality and respect. So the educational function of the law is clearly emphasized. The goal is to no longer limit the lack of consent to the situations in which the perpetrator has used violence, coercion, or surprise. And actually, it is not always necessary for the perpetrator of a rape to use this means. The victim may, for different reasons, remain passive, doing nothing, and yet not consent to the sexual act. The principle is therefore that a person does not consent a priori to sexual relationship, and that consent, sexual consent, must be requested, must be sought. So French law was inspired by several foreign legal models. First, Canada, which was one of the first countries to modify its criminal code. Canada included in 1992 a definition of sexual consent. The Canadian Code also sets out a non-exhaustive list of circumstances in which expressed consent cannot be considered valid. And this is a case, for example, when the victim is intoxicated. So according to this definition, consent consists of the voluntary agreement of the complainant to the sexual activity. In 2018, Sweden became the first European country to modify its criminal definition of rape. Prior to the reform, rape was defined under Swedish law as a sexual act committed with violence or against a vulnerable person. The new definition of rape under Swedish law now places the need to obtain explicit consent at the heart of the offense. So it is no longer necessary to establish that the offender used some form of violence. And finally, one of the most recent examples of an emblematic law is the Spanish law, which also modified its definition of rape in 2022 and again in 2023 to place sexual consent at the center of its definition. Before the reform, consent was often based on the lack of resistance on the part of the victim. And in the absence of an explicit no, there was a presumption of consent to the sexual act. So now Spanish Penal Code provides that consent shall only be understood if it has been freely expressed through acts which, given the circumstances, clearly express the person's will. The person's will. So in other words, silence or the absence of resistance can no longer be interpreted as consent. And what about French law in all this? The law of November 6, 2025 provides for a similar solution. The Penal Code now states that rape implies the absence of the victim's consent. The law further specifies that consent must be free and knowledgeable, it must be specific, it must be given in advance, and it is also revocable. Consent, sexual consent, is appreciated according to the circumstances, so you don't have to write it and to have a contract. It's okay. You can appreciate consent according to the circumstances, and it cannot be inferred simply from the victim's silence or lack of reaction. Finally, and logically, the law specifies that there is no consent if the sexual act is committed with violence, coercion, threats, or surprise, regardless their nature. Unfortunately, I don't have time here to explain why, in my view, and despite appearances, the new law will likely not change much in France. However, its symbolic and pedagogical dimension remains important. We can hope that it will help bring shift in mentality, help bring change in mentalities. And the Swedish example in this regard offers reason for hope. As a Swedish lawyer notes, investigations are more thorough and complaints are less likely to be dismissed. Furthermore, the prosecution rate has increased significantly, including for acts involving violence and coercion. Thus, a shift in attitudes and practices could be the main achievement of this law. So the law here is clearly a key to changing society. So thank you for your attention, and if you have any question, I would be delighted to try to answer them.
Thank you very much, Fabienne, for this interesting and very important talk. I think if you stop sharing, we could open up so we will see each other for this dialogue and discussion after this, because I assume that there are lots of thoughts and that you would like to have some feedback on this as well. So I'll open up the floor for any questions or any comments to Fabienne so we could have a dialogue and discussion. Are there anyone that wants to start up? If not, I could start up then, Fabienne. I know that we could, I think perhaps start where you ended. The new law, which was introduced in November of 2025. I suppose it's too early to say if you were a little bit negative that it could make actual change, but have there been any verdicts? Have there been anything that even if the timing is short, that you could see if it has been any have been any progress or development based on the new law and using of the new law compared to the prior law?
Well, you're right. I'm a little bit pessimist about this new law, but I think it is an important law because it has an educational dimension. But the problem with this law is that the legislator had said that it was just an interpretative law. I mean, this law is just supposed to interpret the former law. So it means that it cannot bring something new. So behavior that could not be prosecuted before will not be prosecuted now, because this new law is only supposed to give sense to the former definition. I don't know if I'm clear on that point, but the idea is that this law doesn't doesn't bring new norms. It's only an interpretation, and the lawmakers say that. So it means that it will be difficult if it's not possible to prove that the perpetrator had used violence or coercion or threat or surprise. I think it will still be difficult to say that the behavior is a rape. For this reason, there is a kind of, how could I say that? I don't know if it makes sense in English, duplicity? I tried this word, I'm not sure it works in English. Well, it's not totally an honest law, I think.
Okay.
And to answer your question, for the moment, it's too soon to say if this law has some results, but it will probably not be the case. And if you read the legal author, everyone thinks the same in France.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else that has any question or comment? Oh, okay, I could go on then. Yes, please, Celia, please.
Yeah, so I know nothing about criminal law, but I had a question. Would the offense be more serious if it was perpetrated by a professor against a student, even though not a minor?
Yes, of course. It would be if we can prove that this person had an authority, exert an authority over the victim. It's not automatic, but if it is possible to prove that the professor had an authority over the victim, had exerted an authority over the victim, so it would be more serious. And it would be punishable by law, and it would be a sentence of 20 years of prison for this kind of situations. Because ordinary rape is only 15 years. The sentence, the sentence that is risking by the perpetrator is only 15 years of prison.
It is not much, I believe. And do you have any idea if it's an average in Europe, or is it low, or is it a lot?
Well, it's difficult to say. Of course, 15 years is the maximum. Then after the judge has to individualize the sentence, the penalty, so it will be less, of course, than 15 years, and less than 20 years. I don't think that there is an average, because it all depends on cases and on the personality of the offender. It will depend on the personality of the offender. But we know that, well, rape is not very prosecuted in France, and the case is often dismissed. And when it is prosecuted, it's sometimes difficult to have a sentence at the end of the trial. And if we had a sentence at the end of the trial, it's not often very heavy sentences.
Thank you very much.
Maivor, please, you had a comment or question.
Yes. Thank you, Fabienne, for the presentation. It was very interesting. I think very interesting. I work with a research project, how to identify if anybody is exposed to intimate partner violence, for example, sexual violence. So I wonder if you, Fabienne, or somebody else is working with some project in the same area as me.
So the question is if I work about intimate violence.
Yes.
Yes, I do. I'm in a team of researchers who works on sexual offenses made by children against children. I don't know if it's very specific, but I work on those issues specifically.
Yes. Because
Yes.
I think if it's some project we could cooperate it.
Oh yeah, it would be nice, of course.
Yes, and I think within the thematic interest groups of inclusion and social justice, that there will be interesting and possibilities. I think that Maivor could assist you to. It's Marie Westerlind on the social behavioral studies who's the contact, but we could get in direct contact as well and try to get you connected to suitable colleagues within the Stars EU Alliance on these topics.
Yeah, if I may, I'm team leader for inclusion and social justice, and we have a dozen people working on those issues in the TIG, so that would be appropriate. If you would like to become a TIG member, I receive our news and talk about that. Yes, I remain at your disposal. That would be great.
Great, Celia. Thank you. Any other thoughts or comments? If not, I still have one. These issues and topics is of course of great importance. It's really grave and disturbing and very bad when these things happen. Depending on the late debate or the debate that you presented in your presentation on what has going on for the last couple of years in France, do you believe that this has been an awakening? This has been very much on the agenda for the discussion in France compared to others of lately, or do you think that we are expecting the similar dialogue? We have, like in Sweden, we have the law on consent and things like that. But do you believe that there's a need of development in other countries as well, or your discussions these years now is breaking the wave for others?
So the question is, if do I think the other countries, other European countries should evolve on this question too?
Yeah.
Right. Well, in fact, there is. I didn't spoke about that because I hadn't enough time to say it. But there is a discussion, a debate on a European level for all these topics, and countries who belongs to the Council of Europe are supposed to modify their definition of rape in order to include sexual consent So it's not such a French law that will be an inspiration for other European countries. I think it will be European law, well, the Council of Europe, that will help the countries to modify their law in order to take into account the sexual consent.
Okay.
But many countries have changed their definition, but not always on the same way. So, for example, in Switzerland, it's not the same definition. So, sexual consent is taken into account, but it's different. For example, in Spain, we usually say that Spain law say that only yes is a yes, solo si es si. I think it's that. And in Switzerland, it's the opposite. It's only if the victims say no that there is a rape. So it's less interesting for victims in this kind of situation. So what I try to say that many European countries have taken into account sexual consent, but not always in the same way, and not all laws are protective for victims.
Okay. Thank you very much. And in there, I think that we hopefully could, within initiatives like the STAR-CU as being an alliance of universities with similar interest across Europe, we could perhaps then do things jointly and learn and inspire and work on these kind of issues jointly in projects, in initiatives, and in research. So that would be of great possibility, I think.
Yes, sure.
Okay. Any other question or remark for Fabienne? Yes, Majvor.
I have put my mail address in the chat if somebody wants to contact me for further co-work.
Okay, I will. I can see it.
Thank you very much, Majvor. Okay, if there are no other further comments or questions, I would once again thank you, Fabienne, again for this important and inspiring and good presentation on the current status and what's going on these issues in France, and some comparison to other countries as well, which I think is most important. And so we'll continue, and we'll try to develop the knowledge and what we do jointly, I think. But for this time, I would like to end the STAR talk by giving you applause and thank you very much for this inspiring presentation. So,
thank you very much. Thank you.
And the next STARS talk will be on April 21st, and it will be on a completely different topic. It will be on robotics that time, but it will be advertised through your channels very soon, and it will be on the website for the STAR-CU Alliance and so on. But please keep track and try to see what's happening, and please join in on more and further STAR talks. There will be in April, there will be in May, and there will be in June. So, and it will be in the autumn as well. So thank you for participating, and thank you all for today.
Thank you.